Today, I'm going to be chatting on how to align API metrics to product objectives. But before jumping into things, just a little background on myself. I'm the CEO of Mosif, the leading API analytics and monetization platform. We love helping API-first businesses with the pricing model, especially around usage-based pricing, and lead with a bottoms-up PLG-based approach. If you ever find yourself in San Francisco, hit me up. My email is right here, and I love IPAs. But why are we chatting about API metrics today? Well, over the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen this massive transition from traditional UI-based SaaS applications, which traditionally were more monolithic and very large platforms, to an ecosystem of small independent APIs. So it's almost like building your own application with a set of Legos, which are your building blocks. But this changes how we think about metrics that is aligned to product success. For the past few decades, we've had lots of different metrics around observability, monitoring, understanding infrastructure health. But if you look at every single one of these metrics, you don't see customer value. We have metrics like SLA, latency, errors per minute, API requests per minute. But when we look at customer value and what you're actually pricing on, it's actually quite different. So for example, if you're Twilio or Cinch, a lot of times your customers are going to be looking at number of text messages, and that's what they're purchasing. For Stripe, it's someone that's trying to grow the revenue of their business and trying to have a nice, sophisticated billing system. For someone like purchasing Datadog, they're looking at log management and metric analysis. And so they're getting a lot of value by trying to shift through lots of data. Similarly, if you're looking at a tool like Segment, they're trying to drive and understand the number of different users using the application. So when you start purchasing a tool like Segment, a lot of times they're priced on unique users. So notice that nowhere in this table do I have things like latency or requests per minute. And so this topic in this talk is mostly discussing these three different product objectives. We have what we call adoption, engagement, and retention. Now, in a given quarter, maybe one of these is actually more important than the other, and this could change over time depending on where you are in the product lifecycle. For example, when you first ship, maybe adoption is the initial thing that you want to focus on, but as you start growing the user base and number of different developers using your APIs, you may switch your focus to engagement and retention metrics. But with that said, let's first discuss adoption itself. And we've noticed this huge trend in how software is bought and sold. So if you look at in 2003, most software was sold on-prem, and the cost to purchase that software was actually quite high. You're selling a large six-figure deal, which means you're mostly selling to C-suite and decision makers. When we see the transition to SaaS in 2013, of course, we moved more towards a transactional sales model where you could sell through insider sales, and you don't need to do those large on-site visits anymore. But in the age of APIs in 2023, we now see that an individual developer can create more value at the organization than a team of 10 people in 2013. So this changes how you think about adoption of your APIs at your company. But with that said, developers also need a lot of buy-in from different stakeholders. There's going to be things around legal and security review, project priorities, procurement's going to have their say before a particular new API or tool can be adopted. And so you can sidestep a lot of these processes by making your API platform self-service. So instead of having sophisticated legal and security reviews, have very simple click-through terms of service the developer can accept and get started with. Instead of competing project priorities, you have a very simple and fast integration process. This could be through easy connectors and integrations. And lastly, instead of trying to go through finance and procurement, make it easy for a developer to put your tool on a manager's credit card. And so what you're trying to do is land lots of developers as quick as possible. And so this allows you to have a very large and wide top of funnel, and it also gets developers to pay with their credit card as quick as possible. So instead of going through a 3 or 6 month pilot what you're trying to do is get developers to sign up, put their credit card down, and start paying, even if it's just a token amount. Maybe it's $50 a month, maybe it's $100 a month, whatever it is, you're getting some seed value ASAP. So how do you actually measure adoption when you're no longer looking at large six-figure deals? Instead, you're focused on getting the initial developers to pay for your product. Well, the way to do that is to build out an activation funnel. In this activation funnel I'm displaying right here, there's 4 different steps. We have the first step, which is just a developer visiting your website, and then they sign up. And we see around maybe 60% of those folks do end up signing up. There's actually a pretty high conversion rate. And then they get to these last 2 steps, which is first hello world and working out. And notice that these are focused on your API platform versus what they're doing on the website. So let's create some definitions. Your first hello world is the time it takes and that conversion rate for a developer to make that very first API call. So this could be using a tool like Postman or curl, but they're already exploring your API and deciding whether they want to continue to invest into it. Then they get to the working out. This is how long it takes and that conversion rate to get to a full working solution, whether that's an integration, it's a mobile app, something they can show to their manager and to their colleagues, but it's a lot more than just making an API call through Postman. But notice with this activation funnel, we now need to track 2 different platforms cohesively. We have what's happening on the website, what a developer is doing in terms of signing up, viewing different documentation pages, blog posts, that type of stuff, to then what they're actually doing with the platform itself in terms of making API calls and building out that integration and application. But it's important for you to actually match that customer value that I spoke on earlier. So going back to that activation funnel, here I'm mapping out the 3 steps. We got sign up, but notice in the yellow box, which is our first hello world, we have just a single payment transaction. So they made at least one API call through a tool like Postman. But then to get to the working out, we're actually measuring the conversion rate and time to get to the last step, which is over 100 payment transactions. So trying to understand what is the percentage of folks to get to that last final step. Moving on to the next area, which is engagement. So this is understanding the usage of your platform in terms of different APIs, different usage levels, and really trying to get a sense of the engagement. And so when we talk about engagement, it's important to not just speak in terms of API calls and requests. Instead, we're looking at the metric that the customer is looking at and how they think about customer value, think about what you're actually pricing on. So for example, if you're an e-commerce platform, it might be looking at things like checkout conversion rate, how many different items you have in stock versus not in stock. If you're a SaaS platform, it might mean the usage of different integrations, different extensions and connectors that you might be providing to your customers. If you're a data API or infrastructure tool, you might be looking at things like match rate, was it found in the database, how many queries and how many successful queries were executed. Lastly, if you're a logistics API, it may mean looking at things like successful order and fulfilled orders. Of course, if you're submitting duplicate orders, we might want to exclude those out because that is not what we consider successful. But it's important to look at 2 different variables when we measure engagement. There's both the breadth and the depth of usage. And when we look at an API platform, a lot of times you have a marketplace or catalog of many different APIs, each handling different functionality and features and capabilities. And so when you look at how a typical customer would adopt a platform, a lot of times they have a very targeted and specific use case. And so they're going to start with a single API and then start expanding their usage, number of transactions. Let's say you're a text messaging API, it may mean the number of different messages that they're sending per month or per day. But then there's actually a lot of other APIs you might offer. So looking at the same example of a text messaging platform, you might have a voice API, a fax API, and a video API. And so we can look at both the amount of text messages a customer is sending, along with are they using any of your other APIs that are available to your customers. When we put that into this flywheel that we're showing here, this is really what drives your sales. Because at the end of the day, we're still looking for large enterprise agreements and not just a bunch of developers that might be spending $50 a month with you. And so you're taking that self-service developer that spent $50 a month, they start increasing their usage, they start increasing the number of text messages that they're sending through the platform, and then they release it to production. And suddenly their usage goes quite a bit up. But then sales engages. Now that they identify this developer somehow deploy their application to production and start working with them to identify new use cases. So this might allow them to increase the volume of text messages that they're sending through the platform due to additional applications that they need, or it might be additional functionality. They already have text messaging set up. Now they could go integrate the voice API or the fax API to continue to increase that engagement. So again, we're looking at both the breadth and the depth of usage, and this allows us to drive what we call this PLG sales flywheel. And this is a cycle that keeps happening over and over and over. So developer is going to increase their usage, integrate another API, and the other API is now going to continue to increase its usage again, which sales will identify and then reach out. And so what you're able to do now is actually do what we call PQL scoring. So this is product qualified leads. And what I'm showing here is a scoring of red, yellow, green. And we can do this through a couple of different variables. It could be meaning how many different APIs are they using. It could mean the volume of transactions for each one of those APIs. Are we the right persona? Are they doing things like adding seats or integrations? So we're trying to understand is how many of our new developers are signing up are what we consider a product qualified lead. But not all traffic is good. So in this example, what I'm showing here is an e-commerce platform, and there's actually three different enum types on the API. We have unavailable, we have available, and out of stock. And even though it looks like there's a lot of usage around this API, we also notice that the unavailable line, which is red, and the out of stock line, which is green, is actually quite high. In fact, if you combine the two, it's higher than the yellow line, which is available. So in this case, what we're showing is, even though we have a lot of active users using the platform, a lot of them are not getting, to that successful or what we call product success because they're seeing a lot of inventory out of stock. So we talked a lot about adoption and engagement, but let's talk about retention for a second. Retention is sometimes the hardest metric to move, but one of the most important because it allows you to ensure that you don't have a leaky boat. Each time you invest $1 into marketing, are you getting the ROI and long-term customers? But how do you measure retention? So this is what a good retention curve looks like. And notice that I'm showing each cohort week, right? So we have week 0, week 1, week 2, all the way up to week 9. And this is showing the first API transaction, that very first hello world is in a particular week. And we're also tracking, does that same developer, are they continuing to use the platform X number of weeks later? Right? So of course in week 0, we have 100% of that cohort is active. They're engaged. But then we notice that once we get to week 1, it starts dropping off. So it starts dropping down to 79% in week 1 for the enterprise cohort. And we have 30 something for self-service. So there's going to be always a large drop off after that very first week, but then notice it flattens out. So in fact, the enterprise starts actually going back up, right? And so the nice thing here is it's flattening out and it's not going down to 0. If both of those curves or one of those segments goes down to 0, that means we have really bad retention because we're trying to pull in all these developers, but after a couple of weeks, they just stop using the APIs. They weren't able to solve the use case. Maybe it was buggy. Maybe they ran into issues, but they're definitely not able to be successful with the platform. And understanding this, not just across your entire customer base or developer base, it's also important to understand this across different segments. What plan they might be on, what is the size of company, who is the title of the developer, what is the different APIs they're using, because this will help enable you to identify where are the gaps, where do you need to invest to bring retention back up. But scaling self-service is hard. So here are a couple things that I recommend to help increase and improve your retention capabilities. You're going to have issues during onboarding. You're going to have changing business needs. And you're going to have billing surprises. You're going to have things like a developer who signs up, they start paying $50 a month, but then they suddenly get a $10,000 bill because they just blew through their usage really quickly. And so this is going to create a very bad customer experience and could heavily impact those retention curves I've just shown. So one thing you can do is give them the tools and capabilities so they can self-manage their account. So this way, even if you have hundreds of thousands of developers, they're able to self-manage and make sure they're able to get on the right plan and path to success. So in this case, I'm showing a way to embed usage dashboards. So you can show, billing, subscription usage, so the developer can see, that they need to upgrade their plan. Are they getting value out of the API? Because remember, these folks, they may not necessarily be logging into UI, every week. So it's hard to see value when the value itself is being delivered through APIs, but at least now they can see number of text messages being sent to the platform on a daily or weekly basis and understand how many maybe different people are being reached through this telecommunications platform. Another thing you can do is try and communicate and avoid things like billing surprises and integration surprises by over communicating these type of issues with your developers. So in this example, we're sending a notification when they exceed a certain subscription quota or a certain amount of usage, so then they know that they need to take action such as maybe upgrading their plan, maybe talk to sales, whatever it is, just letting these folks know, because again, they're not able to log in to your platform every day, especially if the value is delivered through the API. So that's a little bit about aligning metrics for API products. Just a quick intro on MOSAF. We help companies with analytics, use-based billing, and quota management. Definitely, if you have any questions around the topics of analytics and aligning API metrics to product objectives, my email name is right here. And hopefully you have a good rest of API days.
The API Connect Hong Kong 2023 conference is powered by bNovelty Limited. Check out more API-related education content on bnovelty.com or apidays.hk for more information.